He said, when I went in for my first run, machine gun, dropped my bomb, I didn't see a soul. It was like the whole island was asleep. But he said, we were surprised how fast they reacted, because by the time I had came around and was lining up to make a second machine gun run, there was so much fire coming up that I turned and went elsewhere. Oh, I would love to talk to him. There's the guy that dropped the very first bomb to fall at Pearl Harbor that morning. That's the guy that dropped the bomb that got to me physically, spilt of my blood, most likely the very first blood to fall at Pearl Harbor that morning. But in spite of that, I think I'm the guy that got to him mentally with that on-target 50 caliber machine gun fire and changed his mind about coming back and machine gunning us a second time. I have always felt that I was very, very fortunate and that I got to play an active part in that event, like I said before, that got us into World War II. After completing about 20 months overseas, they returned us back. I was stationed over here at Alameda Naval Air Station. I stayed there only about a couple of months, and I got so upset with the way things were going there because most of the crew, it was manned by naval reservists who had joined the Navy to avoid the draft. And believe you me, if you know anything about brown nosing or asmuchio, these guys had it worked down to a talent, because they would do most anything to keep from being sent overseas. And when I saw what was going on, the duty officer, one of the officers called a friend of mine up, who's also an aviation metalsmith, and he said, I understand you guys made a lot of knives while you were overseas. Well, we used to take a file, and you can make some pretty good knives with a file and some of the plexiglass from the blasted out parts of those airplanes. Fingernail polish, if you can get a hold of it somewhere, works real good. So he made one for him, and he told him, he called him back, said, I didn't like that one, I want you to make me another one. I think what he was doing, he was trying to brown nose with the commanding officer and give him one, and he wanted to make him another one. And when he come down and told me that, I marched right up there and I told him, my buddy Mutz just come down and told me what went on up here. And I said, I want you to put me on, and he threatened him. He said, if you don't make that knife, you'll be on the first draft out of here. I went up there and I told him, I want you to put me on that very same draft that you're putting Mutz on. The name is Kohler. I'll spell it out for you so you don't get it wrong, because I want to get out of here. I don't want to be among you guys. I'd rather be out there with the Japanese. Believe you me, of all the requests I put in while I was in the Navy and a little over 6 years, that one got immediate action. Boy, I'm telling you, I was on my way out of there right quick. And, we ended up going back out to Pearl, sent out to Barber's Point. Some of you guys know where that is. We did what they call commando training, beach party training there. When I'm speaking to people, especially young people somewhere, and I say they were training us, we were taking beach party training, they're thinking blondes and booze and bikinis. I'm talking bullet and bayonet beach party. That's the kind we were training for. I spent my birthday in 1944 aboard the USS Kenmore, heading out to sea. Didn't know where we were going till we were out at sea for several days. The skipper come aboard and said, we are heading for the Marshall Islands to participate in the island hopping campaign. Fortunately, when we got down there, our location was to be on Majuro Atoll. Oh boy, what a beautiful natural harbor that place has. It is now the capital of the Marshall Island. Anyway, we arrived there. We weren't too sure what we were going to expect. We down those cargo nets on the side of the ship. Some of you guys maybe had that experience. Into those landing craft, run up onto the sand, jump out into the water. You got your full pack, your rifle, and everything else on. Fortunately, I guess they found out that we were coming, and they weren't strong enough on that island, so they left that island and went over to an adjacent island called Ailing Lap Lap, AILINGLAP. Right here in this very building. When I mentioned that to the previous director, Denver Mills, he said, well, what did you do? And I said, well, my last act in the war was to go to the Japanese-held told ailing Lap to accept their surrender, haul down their flag, raise the American flag. He said, there is no such a place. So he basically called me a liar right here in this building. I have got a globe that I can show him there is an ailing Lap. I know it's there. Anyway, when in what was it? Well, first time I ever shared, I think I told you that. Anyway, in 2010, I, with about 115 of my fellow survivors, were you there, Don? 2010, Mickey, you were there. We were back at Pearl Harbor. I think most every one of those guys, maybe down to the last man, had been there a number of times during those passing years. But for me, that was the first time back there in 64 years. The next day I got to go aboard Ford Island, the first time there in 68 years. Prior to going back there, I had get in contact with a retired Major General, Don Lowe, and he had he knew the people out there because he had just retired and he'd been stationed there at Pearl Harbor, Hickam. And so he made arrangements, helped me get arrangements, and he said, we'll take you anywhere you go when we got here. We'll have a naval historian waiting for you. So after we attended the memorial service and the rededication of the Veterans Center that morning, we went out aboard the USS Arizona Memorial, standing there in the deck of that memorial, looking at that hull of that vessel resting there in the bottom of the harbor, all those names on the honor wall, and know that those are the names of 1,177 crew members who went down with the ship, whose earthly remains are still down there. Oh, my feelings then were so much different than it was that long, long ago Sunday morning when I saw it explode and burn afterward, or then resting there in the bottom of the harbor each time I passed by on a Liberty boat going to from Ford Island. At that time there was no bridge. The only way to get to or from Ford Island was by boat or barge, whatever. The next day, fortunately, even though I was only 17 years old at the time, all of that was happening there that morning, I was able to accept that as the wastes of war. That's what happened, The following morning, in the accompaniment of that naval historian, am I running out of time here? Are you tired of listening to me?
No.
Anyway, we went on to Ford Island. On the way there, we stopped by, paid our respects, honor, and remembrance to those crew members still aboard the USS Utah. Then around to the harbor inland of the island where the old PBY twin-engine flying boat patrol squadrons were stationed. I got once again to stand on the very spot where that first bomb fell that morning. Standing there and close your eyes, it was almost like the whole thing was happening all over again. I wanted to get away from there. I asked that historian, I said, could we go inside of the building? He said, sure. There was a small crew working. They hesitated at first to let us in, but when he identified himself, told them where he was, they let us in. I wanted to get back up in that office that I was in that morning, because either there in that office, in that ditch that we were ordered into, or in the gun blister of that PBY airplane where I was firing that 50 caliber machine gun from, somewhere there that morning I lost that 17-year-old sailor. I never ever found him again. Talk about something that will rob you of your youth. Boy, you get in something like that. I had joined the Navy on what was called a minority cruise. You could join when you were 17 years old if you could get your parents' permission. So that's what they did, and I went in on April 3rd of 1941 on what was called a minority cruise. But old salts like Mickey and Don, they called it a kiddie, K-I-D-D-Y, a kiddie cruise. They considered us kids, but I'm telling you, I was trying to be the very, very best military man that I could be, Anyway, things have passed, but if you have been involved in something like that, you will never, ever forget those things, what happened there. Some of you people today, I'm sure, were a little bit uncomfortable with the heat that we've had, and Scott and I talked about it a lot, about coming in that Jeep, because boy, you're right out there in the sun. And I made the mistake of taking us the long way around, so we kind of cooked on the way. But while we were doing it, I was thinking, well, what about those guys over there in full battle dress, under battle conditions in the deserts of Africa, fighting against Rommel and his forces? I mean, we have a chance to get out of it. They didn't have. And we have our young men and women even today, maybe even as we are gathered here talking, who are in similar conditions in different parts of the world. Whenever you think that things are tough for you, think about them once in a while. Things are really, really get tough there. When we got home from that event, my dear sweet wife said to me, what was it like to go back to the seat in that battle after all these years? Well, I'd never really thought about it before. Like I said, our youngest son, 46 years old, said, I didn't know Dad was a Pearl Harbor survivor. So I started thinking about it, and boy, when I did, those thoughts came flooding in, and I knew that if I didn't write it down, they would be gone, you know. So I would grab a piece of paper. We might be sitting at the table eating. I'd push the meal aside. I'd write down what I was thinking. Or I might be out in the backyard in my small office, my small shop working. I still work. I'm only 93. I'm the kid of the bunch. I'm only 93. And so I work on an on-call basis. I provide a specialty service to a large construction company that's just been sold for $175 million. I wish I could get some of that. Anyway, there was no time at all, and I had wads of those notes. And I figured I'd better get it together so it will mean something, you know, something to somebody. Anyway, those of you who have been to Pearl Harbor, if you will listen carefully, see if it reminds you of what you saw and what you were bound to feel while you were there. Those of you who maybe haven't went yet, I would encourage you to go at your earliest opportunity. And if you remember what we say here tonight, maybe it'll help to prepare you for what you will see and feel while you're there. I've called it a tour of remembrance. From within those rusting hulls of sunken ships, reminders of what used to be, echo calls to remember from those there entombed that freedom is never free. For those who've answered duty's call, in the air, on land, or at sea, where liberties and freedoms come under threat, that's where they choose to be. They all gave some, and some gave all, those liberties and freedoms to save, but those valued treasures can only remain if protected by the gallant and the brave. The bombs blast, the cannons roar, the sights and sounds of battle, the cries of the wounded, the sighs of the dying, amid bursts of machine gun rattle, the fires, flames, the burning airplanes, the sight of sinking ships, with death raining from the skies right before our eyes. How could we ever forget? Some men guns put up a fight, a victory hoped to gain. They stood their ground, then many with their ships went down, and down there they shall forever remain. Those shipmates and buddies, forever they're lost, never to breathe air again, must always be honored and forever remembered, or their sacrifices will have been in vain. Some saw it all, got involved, each in his own way, and for those who did and still survive, it's like only yesterday. We've grown old, tried to move on, things we've tried to forget, but try as we will, those memories linger still, and for some, it's not over yet. Our seasons pass, the time draws near, the last survivors will have faded from sight. Then comes each following 7th of December. Will there always be those who will care enough not only to remember, but to remember and then go to the top of Mount Diablo on that night and light the light?